And welcome everybody to God's Views on Political News. We're so glad to see you this week. Bill is once again out there on the highway somewhere on an unknown world, and but we're hoping that everything with connection works well. How you doing, Bill?
I'm good. I'm good. A little road weary. I actually am on the planet. I'm in I'm in East Texas, working my way back home. So I'll be home late tonight. Looking forward to that.
All right. Well, really good. I'm getting a little delay, so hopefully it's fine though, and it's going to work well. We'll just keep going. Last week we spent a lot of time talking about uranium-1. And this week, now with all of everything happening with Paul Manafort yesterday, who, Bill, was President Trump's campaign manager for a really short period of time. And we'll kind of want to go over and start with Paul Manafort and what's been going on with that, and kind of for those who don't know, because the left yesterday went crazy thinking oh my gosh, this is about the president and the president's going to get impeached and everything else, and they were really happy about it. So I want to go over with you what it all means.
Okay.
So let's start with there are 12 counts, and I just want to briefly tell you what they were. The first one is a conspiracy against the United States. And that's impeding, impairing, obstructing lawful functions of the DOJ and the Department of Treasury. In other words, what that means is tax fraud. That's what we're talking about. Some type of fraud with the IRS, and they look at that as being a conspiracy against the United States. Number 2 was money laundering, wire transfers, etc., out back and forth in the United States. That happened in the years 2006 to 2016. That first count was 2006 to 2017. And I'm telling you the dates because they will be important in just a few minutes. Counts 3 through 6 are failure to file reports of foreign bank and financial accounts for the calendar years 2011, 2014. Counts 7 through 9. Basically the same thing from 2011 to 2013. So failure to file reports of foreign bank doing transactions with them. Count number 10, unregistered agent of a foreign principal. So basically the accusation there is you didn't register as a foreign agent. That was 2008 to 2014. In the time period you're saying when you was doing business with Russia, he wasn't registering as a foreign agent. Counts number 11 and 12 both have to do with the time period, November 23rd, 2016 to February 2017. And that's when he was the campaign manager for then nominee Donald Trump. And that would have been, and also into President Trump, false and misleading FARA statements, F-A-R-A, that's failure to register as a foreign agent. And what he did was it looks as though they're accusing him of lying about being a foreign agent and not telling the DOJ that he was a foreign agent at one point.
An agent to what? For what purpose?
For working with Russia. And what he says is that he was working with them trying to make Ukraine favorable, so sort of like promoting Ukraine to the United States and getting a foot up there. But there's so much more surrounding it. Basically, there were tons of allegations regarding tons of wire transfers that took place. And I think those were the ones that really caught the eye of the FBI, supposedly, back in 2012 when these wire transfers were happening. The IRS was claiming, different things were happening. And again, all of these are just allegations.
Right.
Nothing has been proven.
So here's what my simple mind has heard so far, that there's some paperwork that he did not file, or there's some, things that he did not report money-wise, that's what they're dealing with right now so far.
Well, they're also saying there were wire transfers that may have been improper. I mean, I think, they kind of want to look at that and say, was there anything improper with those wire transfers? Here's what they want to find out, Bill. Were you transferring money to back and forth between the United States and Russia because you were colluding with Donald Trump and trying to fix our elections? That's what they're trying to say.
Although that charge hasn't been made.
Correct.
Okay.
But they're saying there's something with the wire transfers we want to take a look at, and something that was maybe money laundering is what they're saying. Money laundering was happening with these wire transfers.
Okay.
And again, they're only allegations. So when this came out, yesterday, as I said, the left went crazy. And what did they do? They started attacking the White House press secretary, Sarah Huckabee Sanders. And by attacking her, I mean the press, the White House press, went absolutely crazy. Because what they were doing is they wanted to get their agenda in front of the camera. They didn't want to ask a question about, okay, do you know anything about what Paul Manafort did and what he's being accused of? It was mostly directed right at the president and saying, why did the president hire somebody like this? Why would president, does this mean that he made a bad decision in hiring? And they want that to go towards, the president is unstable. He's crazy. He makes bad decisions. He can't be president of the United States. Let's impeach him.
Okay. Well, I'm definitely familiar with people who, this is an apples and oranges comparison, but people who, we want to ask you a question, but really what they want to do is to get you to stop and then allow them to share a dissertation.
Exactly.
So yeah, I'm familiar with that methodology, that tactic. So I don't doubt it at all.
Yeah, and especially I think Jim Acosta is a perfect example. He's a CNN reporter, absolutely appears to hate the president, because anytime the president speaks or has anything to say, he has to come out and tweet against him. And bottom line, I think he's upset because the president talked about CNN being fake news. Jim has never gotten over that. So Jim asking a question yesterday, it must have been a page long before he actually got around to the question to Sarah Huckabee Sanders. So he's the biggest, one who does that all the time. But when it got over to Twitter, they were, as we're seeing, the left is really, it seems to be increasing the vitriol against anybody on the right. And they were name calling against her. They had her dressed up and, photoshopped where she was dressed up in a what appeared to be a German Nazi outfit with a swastika on the armband. I mean, and they were claiming that she's just a shill for the president, in other words.
Well, I mean, come on. She's got to defend the president. That's what she's up there to do. She's, anyway. So now, back to these charges and the indictment and everything. Just what is your view from a legal standing? What are we dealing with here?
Well, I mean, we're dealing with the grand jury indictment. We're dealing with an FBI director, now special counsel, who has gone in and said, we think there's probable cause to hold this over for a trial.
Okay.
And nothing yesterday, absolutely nothing, connects President Trump in any way with collusion with the Russians, anything regarding interference with the elections. And here's the other point. This special prosecutor, special counselor, was appointed to do one thing, and that was to look at Russian interference with the election. He didn't give us that. He gave us nothing that was connected to that. What he did was he really did go on a witch hunt, and he went back to 2006 to look at something, tax fraud, some type of fraudulent wire transfers, things of that nature, but didn't give us anything connected to the Russian interference with the election.
Well, I do not understand a lot of these legalities and the vernacular that's used, and I'm just kind of listening to all this go on. Here's how I feel about it. I don't think it's an accident that with all this stuff that's coming up about the Clintons' involvement, I know we'll get into that in a little bit, and we talked about some of that last week. I don't think it's an accident that with all the news breaking in that regard, and by the way, some of the news media's hesitation to even talk about those kinds of things.
Yes.
I don't really think it's an accident. It's highly, highly suspicious that now this indictment is coming out and this, all these things. So, I mean, That's typical politics, as far as I'm concerned. Is it just happenstance? I doubt it very seriously. So that being said, I've always been of the view that, let's plow into this. Let's find out what happened. Let's find out who's involved. But let's make sure that if we can, that everything gets investigated. Everything gets turned over. So, and if somebody did something wrong they weren't supposed to do, let's deal with that. If this gentleman Manafort, if he broke the law, let's just see if the FBI gets into what were his intentions. Did he have it? What were his intentions when he ignorantly didn't fill out these pieces of paper? You follow what I'm saying here?
Yeah.
So let's see if they can divine his intentions in all of this, because they seem to be good at that here lately.
Yeah.
Whether determining whether or not they're going to press charges against someone who has broken the law,
or whether it looks like they have,
or whether it looks like that. So I'm just I feel like for American citizens, we need to know what's going on. We need to uncover as much as we possibly can. And so if there's ever going to be any kind of confidence in the FBI and the Justice Department and the way things are done, then these things need to be brought to light. But it all needs to be brought to light.
Yeah.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, no, you're absolutely right, because yesterday, as I was saying, the left was attacking Sarah Huckabee Sanders. At the same time, there was an announcement made that Tony Podesta, who is the brother of John Podesta, who together they own the Podesta Group. And John, as you may recall, was the campaign manager for the Hillary Clinton campaign.
Oh, yeah, I recall.
You recall that?
Yeah.
So what happened was there was an announcement made that now that Mueller, the special counsel, is looking at Tony Podesta and is kind of, but no indictment, nothing has come down yet, but it's probably going to be basically for pretty much the same thing that they went after Manafort for, at least as far as not failing to register as a foreign agent and maybe failing to report some income that he had gotten. But it was I would just say odd, not really, that the left grew very silent once Tony Podesta's name was thrown around, because he's on the left, and that was something that they just didn't expect Mueller to do at all.
Well, let me read you a passage of scripture that I think is applicable here to our conversation, and it's in Proverbs. And it says, "A false balance is abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight." In other words, if something is going to be measured, or if something's going to be examined, or if something is going to be investigated in this particular case, and you put your thumb on this side of the scale, and it's not a just weight, it's not balanced, it's not fair, it's not truthful, and you're trying to manipulate things, that is an abomination. And so if Mueller, if the FBI, whoever, is trying to manipulate this to make one person look bad, or the Trump administration look bad, or what have you, and yet keep silent and try to manipulate things to cover up what Podesta or the Clintons or whoever, as far as I'm concerned, I bet you the Obamas are involved in this somehow or another, but to try to hide and conceal their involvement in these things, that's an abomination. And I am of the opinion that, like we were speaking of last week, what we're seeing going on is the Creator is beginning to expose these things. So that's why I say if Manafort did something wrong, then that needs to come to light. It needs to be dealt with. And so far, it sounds like has nothing to do with the Trump administration and the Trump campaign. It's just some things he didn't do, or he did do that he wasn't supposed to.
Well, and here's some things that are kind of interesting, and I think we have to keep in mind. And when you're talking about equal justice, and here's how you get it: you're very open about things, everything's transparent, and then you go for everybody. Like you said, you search everything to get there. Keep in mind that from 2001 to 2013, Robert Mueller, who is the special counsel, was at that time the FBI director. Mm-hmm. So if you look at the charges that were brought against Manafort and the indictment, all of them, let's see, the 2006 was the earliest one. FBI Director Mueller was the FBI director at that time. And so that went all the way from 2006 to 2017 in those charges. And for most of that time, we had Mueller as the FBI director. My question is, what were you doing during that time when all this was happening?
Well, it kind of makes me think that he knew where to look, or he knew what to, to dig into, because he was probably already aware of some of these things that were going on. If he was the FBI director and he was, doing his job. So yeah, it's a good question. I think, why weren't these things dealt with then? Why didn't they come to light, then? I'm not a good politician. I'm not really good at that way of thinking, but it seems like you have to be of a breed that I just don't, care to be around, to hold things back, to kind of pack things away, to bring them out, when it's convenient for you to use. And that's, I know that a lot of people say that Mueller is a above board person, both on the left and right, but this smacks of politics, doesn't it?
It really does. And the thing too with that is, during this time, supposedly, you're looking at Manafort, who was at the same time he was supposedly doing these wire transfers and all that. He was spending like over $1 million on clothes. He was spending $1 million on rugs. He was buying like several Range Rovers and spending a lot of money on different things. Now, doing that is not illegal. But what that says is if you have that type of money to kind of throw around, you got a lot of money. And I'm just saying that would, to me, would cause at least the IRS and perhaps even the FBI to go and look and see, is something going on here? Do we have something bigger? Do we have a money laundering case? And so why wasn't that done? Now, there's some allegations that say, well, in 2012, the government sort of started looking at this stuff. Okay, so from 2006 to 2012, 6 years, you did nothing? You didn't notice anything? You didn't see anything that would look suspicious to you and maybe be money laundering, and you didn't go investigate that? Seems a little odd, but okay. It also, to me, Bill, it sounds a lot like our discussion on Uranium One last week, where we were talking about when FBI Director Mueller, again, that name keeps coming up, Mueller was the head of the FBI and also in charge of, at that time, looking at the racketeering scheme that he felt, or everybody felt was going on between the Russians and that Uranium One cell. And supposedly the FBI director Holder and Rod Rosenstein, the guy who appointed Mueller into this special counsel position right now, he was then working for Robert Mueller. They supposedly knew this information about how corrupt the Russians were in this Uranium One deal. And yet, before the deal was signed, they knew it all, and they didn't tell anybody. They didn't tell Hillary Clinton, and they didn't tell Obama. And so it seems to me, here we have information again over here in Uranium One that was supposedly not told to anybody, but the FBI knew about it. We're over here now in this deal with Manafort. Were they researching it? And once again, they didn't do anything about it. Let's say they did do something in 2012. Did they sit on that information for 5 years? Why didn't they do something? Why didn't they tell somebody? Perhaps at that point, President Trump, then candidate nominee for President Trump, wouldn't have hired Manafort. Did you want him to hire Manafort? Was that did you think, you know what I'm saying? It just smacks in the wrong place for me.
Well, like I said, this all smacks of politics, and I'm going to kind of go off on a little sidebar here, but in my mind, it's connected. With the release of all these heretofore concealed files in the JFK assassination, and you get through all this kind of stuff. You look at all of the information that's going back and forth and all the different discussions about this, that, and the other. Obviously, those kinds of things go on all the time. So it's not a stretch in my mind to think that, yeah, these were things that they were already aware of, privy to, had looked into, and given the political climate at the time and the administration at the time, I don't have a hard time believing that there were certain people say, let's just kind of hold on to this information. We might need it one day.
Exactly.
That's kind of what I think,
No, and I think you're right. And maybe they, well, it kind of leads me into what I wanted to say next. And that is, from the very beginning, that I have felt that Robert Mueller, and I think we've talked about this on other shows, I feel that he should never have been appointed as special counsel. Number one, because he knew Comey. This was the former FBI director that was eventually questioned by Robert Mueller in regards to this whole, did Trump try to obstruct justice and fire him because of X, Y, and Z to cover, on and on and on. Robert Mueller was lifelong friends for a very long time, with Jim Comey. They worked together under Eric Holder and under Obama. Yeah. And Comey took Mueller's place as FBI director when Mueller left. So number one, right there, that should have been, don't appoint this guy. The GOP Congress sat around and said absolutely nothing about that. One guy, Trent Franks, I think, was the only GOP guy that said, hey, there's a conflict of interest here. We need to get rid of this guy.
Yeah. And
now there's absolutely no way this guy's going anywhere.
No. You know what I've noticed? And I agree. I mean, he should have, this is my opinion, if he's such a man of integrity, then he should have just kind of, removed himself from the situation. But I've noticed that people who are on the right tend to do those kinds of things. Like Jeff Sessions, for instance. He recused himself from this whole Russian investigation. But you've got people on the left like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who in certain things were coming up before the court. She wasn't going to recuse herself. Right. So that leads me to think that that Mueller's tendencies politically probably go toward the left, and they're not going to remove themselves from these kinds of situations. They're going to exploit those that would stand down, who wouldn't call these things into question. And to me, that is, again, tied to something we see scripturally, how the adversary works. He exploits the passive. He exploits those who are going to try to be peaceful and try to seek justice. He exploits their weaknesses, in other words.
Yeah. And Jeff has said, that Jeff is in our chat room, this past year has been a painful year of reality. The blinders completely fell from his eyes. He said he now is able to see the whole of the United States political system is corrupt. It does not matter which side we listen to. They say the other side is lying and we have the truth. They, the Dems and Republicans, speak mistruth loudly, boldly, and over a long period of time until people believe what is being said. And I agree with a lot of what he's saying there. Because as we know, Saul Alinsky's rules of radicals. I agree too. It is corrupt, and and with some exceptions, both parties, both of those institutions, they have their own agendas, they have their own self-interests, and so it is corrupt. It's corrupt to the core. That's no secret anymore to most of the American public. But what I want to go back to something we talked about last week. What I really sense is happening is there are little cracks and things are beginning to leak out. And I'm at the place I believe that God is speaking. And in Scripture, he said that when he begins to speak in the last days, that everything is going to get shaken. Everything that is unworthy of standing is going to be removed. It may not happen immediately, right overnight, but I think we're seeing the stages of that. We, not to get off track, but the revelations that continue to come out of Hollywood. Yesterday, Kevin Spacey
had to come out and make a statement and all this kind of stuff. And there's more and more accusations coming out against him and these other guys. And so the Hollywood system is beginning to show the effects of this shaking, because that's an industry, an institution, if you will. And so going back to the whole Mueller, Manafort, Russian collusion, all these things, you get this sense that, boy, something's getting ready to happen that's going to turn us on our ear. And it's because God is weeding out corruption. That's what I believe. Well,
and I also, too, Don was saying repeat it enough and it will sink in. And that's exactly, it's true, Don, that, and we see that a lot. I wanted to also continue with a little bit on Mueller, because I think, it's kind of like, if you want to find justice, you have to have this, it has to be no look of impropriety whatsoever.
Right.
And as we talked about last week, with Mueller and his role in Uranium One, and what I just said about his role, to me, that's it. We don't know if he's hiding something now. I mean, is he going back? And I've had people say this to me, and I didn't go there, but I've had people say to me, so if he was FBI director during that time and he didn't find anything, is he now going back there and cleaning up the records and getting rid of things?
Thought crossed my mind as well.
Okay. So, and there again, if he wasn't connected, we wouldn't even be having to ask those questions. And as we know, that he hired all those donors, lawyers that were donors of Hillary Clinton. So he's surrounding himself with those people. And if you believe what you just said, and so does that mean that they're helping him kind of clean things up? And I look at this too as at the very least, he would be a witness to what went on during that time period. So against Holder and Hillary and Obama.
Well, isn't that why people are starting to speak up and say, hey, we need an investigation of the special prosecutor and this whole investigative process, And you're right. If someone has integrity, they would abide by the scriptural principle of avoiding the very appearance of evil. It's even if you haven't done anything wrong. You don't want to even give the impression that you've done anything wrong, because it's going to cast doubt on what you come up with and what you find and what you present before a grand jury, or a jury trial. Right. So so integrity doesn't seem to be the strong suit for most people who are working in Washington right now. It seems to be just really pressing an agenda. So let me go back to something else that one of the comments. If you say it long enough, it'll sink in. So let me say this again and again and again. We really need to be praying that God will expose those things that need to be brought to light. And it might be painful, quite frankly. It might be very painful. But if we're ever going to be able to restore things back to the way they should be, and maybe could be, then we have to be willing to let God bring down those things that are the very reason things are corrupt. So I'm continuing to believe that, pray for that, hope for that, and I think we need to do those kinds of, as believers, we need to press for those kinds of things. I hope I'm making sense here.
Yeah, and I think that unfortunately, I think some of this is not being told to the American public. I think a lot of in the public knew the connections with Mueller to all of these different things, from Comey to Uranium One, to a possibility of even being connected to the Fusion GPS dossier that a lot of people have talked about. And I know it all just a tangled web.
Can I say something? I'm sorry. I just want to say something as far as if the American public knew these things. Look, you know this, but just for the sake of those listening, a lot of the American public doesn't even know how the government's supposed to work.
That's true.
I watched a video of it was a college student. He was a 20-something, and he was in a political science major. And he was asked, name one of the Bill of Rights. He couldn't do it, and just simple, fundamental questions about how the government's supposed to work, what's in the Constitution. And he was a political science major, and he couldn't answer those questions. So my point is, unfortunately, a large segment of the American public doesn't care, doesn't know, because they're too interested in too many other things. So there you again, those who have an unrighteous agenda exploit that fact. They exploit the ignorance or the apathy of people, and they're able to get away with these things. And then on the other side, there are very few people who are willing to stand up and take a stand and call these things what they are.
Yeah, I mean, it's really bad because, again, there are a lot of people that don't even know there are 3 branches of government. And if they do know that there are 3, they don't know what they are and they don't know what they do. And it's really sad. We don't seem to teach that in public schools anymore because that would be, I don't know, too taxing. I'm not really sure.
Or it might make somebody feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. So, and somebody's here that doesn't believe in government, doesn't think there should be a constitution. It might offend those people. So, I mean, no wonder we're in so much trouble. But if people did know, they would know that they should be calling for a special prosecutor right now, special counsel, to look into Hillary Clinton's uranium one, what her connection was to that, Obama's, Eric Holder, Robert Mueller, and Rod Rosenstein, just to name a few.
What do you think the chances of that happening are? Really?
Let's see. Bill, if we had the majority in the House and the majority in the Senate, and we also had the president, I think it would be really high. But because we have the people we have who are rhinos and who are basically, they might as well call themselves the left anyway. We're probably not going to see that happening. We even had Lindsey Graham, who has to come out, Senator Lindsey Graham from South Carolina, who had to come out yesterday and talk to Fox News, I guess because John McCain wasn't available, and said, we can't get rid of Mueller. If we did, all hell would break loose. These conversations should have been had day one. We even had Trey Gowdy, who a lot of people love. I love Trey Gowdy. He's a great prosecutor. Doesn't have a lot of results that we see coming out of, what he does on the House. Not big, that's just, it's a show. It's why we don't see it. But he came out and said, Mueller's a great guy. I think we should keep him in there. I told Mueller, what you should really look out for is don't let any leaks occur. And then right after the leak occurred to CNN that it was probably Manafort and there was going to be an indictment on Monday. This was on a Friday. Then Trey Gowdy comes out and says, gosh, we should, Mueller's not doing a great job. So there you go.
Well, isn't leaking that kind of information that's supposed to be sealed kind of illegal in and of itself?
It's a federal offense.
Yeah. Well, we go back to the statement that's been made a couple of times here. It's corrupt. The system is corrupt, and the corruption needs to be exposed. And to say that is one thing, but when it begins to happen and you see where all these things will lead, it would be a painful process. It will be, but
a long and expensive one, right?
It will, because all these things didn't get this way overnight. It's been an ongoing, steady decay, I guess you'd say, morally, ethically. But if this nation is ever going to get back on its feet morally, and if it's going to get back on its feet fundamentally, then these are the kinds of things that are going to happen. It will be as it would be just as big an upheaval as the American Civil War 150 years ago, but just in a different way.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny now too, when the thing came down yesterday that Podesta was being possibly looked at, somebody, and I haven't verified this, and somebody else, I've had several people tell me, Nancy Pelosi is now calling for Mueller to step down. So he was fine. I know.
I wish there was a thermometer that I could see online in hell right now to see what the temperature is. I have a feeling it got a lot colder in the last couple of days.
Yeah. I mean, it's just
Wow.
amazing. It goes up
That
and
is
down.
amazing.
It is.
Right.
Jeff said some may not agree with what he's going to say here. He says, I don't believe believers are called to be connected directly to one party or another. Personally, I would love to see believers being rejected by either the Republicans or Democrats, and they form a party that views politics and society through the lens of the Bible. Then we can have a true parliamentary government. Also, it would put believers in a position to truly live out Scripture before the country.
I don't disagree with Jeffrey on that. I don't. I agree that when we allow ourselves to be aligned to one party or the other, we can get sucked into that political party's agenda. Now, that being said, there's no way that I'm going to align myself with the Democratic Party and their platform. The closest thing we have right now is what I would say a very small minority within the Republican Party and maybe some of these other smaller, like the Constitutional Party and things like that. That's the closest thing we have to what I believe. But Jeffrey's right. I mean, if believers would really be believers, if Christians would really behave, act, think, speak like what we're commanded to do in Scripture, the party, if you want to call it that would result from people just actually doing what Messiah said to do would turn this country on its ear. And I mean, in a good way.
Yeah, but and I don't disagree with Jeffrey, but I don't think there's anywhere in the Bible that says that you shouldn't align yourself with one party or another. I mean, there's certainly nothing against being a Republican or a Democrat or an independent.
No, there's nothing wrong with being, registered as a Republican or what have you. No, that's not what I'm saying. But eventually, as a believer, my allegiance is going to, have to be demonstrated, whether I'm going to obey God or whether I'm going to obey man. And so if the Republican Party continues going down the road it's on, then I can't, adhere to that kind of a mindset and belief system. I mean, we've got Republicans now who believe, and I know we want to get back on the other topic, but since we're talking about this, there are Republicans who believe that it's the government's job to come up with an insurance plan for everybody. I just don't believe that. We've got Republicans who believe that abortion's okay. I just don't believe that. Yeah. And so farther down this progressive road we go, and eventually, believers are going to have to make a decision. So I think that's what Jeffrey's saying.
Yeah.
I don't want to put words in his mouth, but that's definitely how I believe. Okay, so he agreed. All right, so good.
He agreed with both of us.
Okay.
So that's good. Hey,
okay.
He's a diplomat too.
Right, very good.
Robin was saying things are upside down, and eventually, God is going to agree, is going to reveal all of it. And she also agrees with what we were both discussing. I do think that, as you were saying, if we go into and getting a special prosecutor and all that on Mueller, it is going to open up a bigger can of worms. And I think some people are just thinking, it looks like Mueller's working on the right path. Let's let him go. What I always dread about the Republicans is they always seem to be on a reactive and not proactive. I feel that from the very beginning, we should have been looking at Hillary and Obama and everybody else from the get-go. And because we didn't, they got a leg up on us, and they were able to go in and sort of maneuver everything. And they're still doing it. They're still manipulating stuff. So that's my whole thing about, but I still think we need to call for a special prosecutor. Absolutely.
Well, I follow, what's the actor's name? James Wood.
Oh yeah. I love him.
Twitter, because he's a riot, and pretty doggone, bright.
Yes.
But I saw that he had tweeted out that for the first time ever, he thinks that Hillary might in fact answer for her crimes. And
he's still living today?
Well, the guys he plays in the movies, he's a, well, never mind. Shut up, Bill. No, just play. No, but I where Hillary and Bill and the Clintons and that whole thing are concerned. And it may not happen this way, but eventually your sin will find you out.
Yeah.
That's what the Bible says. That applies to you and me too, by the way. Mm-hmm. It's going to run you down, and eventually things will come to light. And I just get this sense that maybe their days as far as carrying on these clandestine operations and getting away with it, I don't know. I just kind of feel that maybe those days are coming to an end. I think that there are those who are definitely trying to shield and protect them from these kinds of things, and probably are benefiting from that effort. But I just have this sense that something's about to happen in that regard. Don't have anything to put my finger on exactly, but just have that sense. So we'll see. We shall see.
I think they'd be more apt to happen if we had a special prosecutor. I really do.
Well, then maybe we need to not only press that point with our congressmen and senators, but also to appeal to God that would happen.
And I have been doing that, I'll tell you. And also we can also pressure the DOJ to do that, because they're the ones that really should appoint the special prosecutor. But in this situation, not very likely that they would be doing that. So
now, why do you say that? Why do you think they're not likely to do that?
Well, because Jeff Sessions has recused himself with all things Russia. And I think the Uranium One, because it has a Russia connection that could possibly lead over, I know it's a stretch, but could possibly lead over into any type of interference with the Russian government based upon something that happened a long time ago. He's going to recuse himself from that. And I think that Rod Rosenstein, who was involved back in Uranium One, if there was any amount of wrongdoing or any suspicion of wrongdoing or anything, he's not going to want to open up an investigation on Uranium One, and neither is Mueller. So there you go.
So then there needs to be the other shoe needs to drop somewhere, that people just don't have any choice.
Yes. Yeah. And we'll see if we get there. I don't know.
Okay.
But another thing that I wanted to talk about today, because a lot of people are they confuse Uranium One with the Fusion GPS dossier, and they think it's the same thing.
I'm one of those people.
Well, and I want people to understand what it is, and as best as I know, I can tell you, and then you can do other research and get even more information. But I want to do a little rundown. Robin said everyone in the government is hiding something, so don't trust any of them. I mean, that's good advice. I don't think you should be trusting your government, trusting God, and then, the government, if they're following, you can halfway trust in that. But okay, so here's what we have. There was the Hillary Clinton campaign. Keep these players in mind. Hillary Clinton campaign, the DNC, and now we're finding that Obama's Organizing for America group. All of those people, allegedly, let's say, gave money to Fusion GPS, which was a company, to do some research. They wanted to get the dirt on President Trump. He wasn't president at the time. He was candidate Trump, nominee Trump. So they could find out that there was some connection, some collusion in Russia, and we're gonna bring him down, and he won't ever be president. That was basically what it was. So what they did was, at least according to the allegations, Hillary Clinton presidential campaign and the DNC went to their attorney, Mark Elias, who works for the law firm of Perkins Coie, Coie. And they said, we want to get this information. Here is, let's see, supposedly the Clinton campaign paid $5.6 million and the DNC paid $3.6 million. And Obama paid about $1 million in his organization. We're looking at about approximately $12 million to go and dig up dirt on the president. So the lawyer,
when he was a candidate or after he was a
candidate and nominee and all that, and who knows how long it went, but that's what they wanted. So the money was given from the attorney of the DNC and the Clinton financial campaign, handed over to the attorney. The attorney then took it to Fusion GPS. Fusion GPS said, okay, who can we get to get this information for us? I know. We'll go to Christopher Steele, who is a British intelligence officer. We'll pay him, and he can give us all the dirt from the people he talks to in Russia. So got the players so far? Making sense? Okay.
So far. So they're just being politicians at this point.
They're being politicians. And I don't know. It could be money laundering, but let's not go there. There are no allegations of that. I'm just saying you're passing money one hand to the other, trying to dig up dirt, if that's all you're doing.
Okay.
So Christopher Steele writes this salacious dossier. That's where the dossier comes in.
Okay.
Which basically says, I mean, really horrendous stuff that's never been proven, that Trump denies, and saying things like he had prostitutes in Russia, all of this horrible stuff.
Okay.
All right. And he was hired. This guy was hired. Steele was hired in June 2016 to get the dirt on Trump and say that there was coordination and collusion between Trump and Russia. So pretty late in the game, 2016 in June. Now, and we also know that prior to Christopher Steele being hired, we know now that a Republican went to Fusion and they were looking for dirt too. But they paid some money, but they withdrew before Christopher Steele came along. We now know that was the Washington Free Beacon, which is a conservative website news organization. They are the ones that paid money to Fusion. Again, they paid no money to Christopher Steele. This was before Christopher Steele.
Okay.
Okay. So after Trump was elected, now here's the odd thing that comes up about this. After he was elected, FBI Comey paid Steele to continue to proceed to get intelligence about Russia. Now, does that strike you funny at all?
Okay, so, all right, let me kind of boil it down for me so I can kind of follow this. Basically, you've got people who are being politicians. They're trying to find dirt that they can release on somebody they want to defeat. All right, so that's standard pretty much, right?
Right.
But then you've got a government official stepping into that scenario and paying the same person to, now we're going to call it intelligence.
Right.
Okay.
And there are some things that are kind of troubling about this, because gathering dirt isn't a problem. Just gathering dirt on something.
I mean, that's the name of the game in politics.
That's the name of the game in politics.
Right.
What happens is that when it came time for them to comply with the campaign finance rules, what you're required to do, they labeled some of these things as legal and compliance consulting. So in other words, they didn't say, we've taken this money and we've used millions of dollars to go out here and get dirt on then candidate Trump. They didn't label it properly, and they used money to get that without labeling it properly, in violation of campaign finance rules, allegedly. So there was a lawsuit filed, and that one is going on right now.
Okay, so that's the controversy then, that they didn't label it properly. Obviously, that would insinuate that they were trying to cover up that they were doing this. All right. I mean, is that a serious allegation, or is this just a slap on the wrist kind of a thing, or what?
It could be a serious allegation if you can prove, let's say this, were they paying money to get Russians to say something, to make up stuff? I don't know. Right, well, that's not being alleged.
Yeah, that would be speculative. But but anyway, in my mind, just based on what you told me, that's nothing new in politics. Now, what I would be curious about is why Comey got involved with the same people, we're not going to call it dirt now, we're going to call it intelligence. So that, that's kind of something that will raise my eyebrow there. Yeah.
When you have the FBI, whose job it is to do an investigation, you're going to rely on a British intelligence officer.
Right. Why don't you have field officers gathering this kind of information for you? Yeah, that would be the thing that would raise my interest and find out what's going on there.
And something else may be going on too, Bill, because here's the funny thing. Everybody that's involved in the Clinton campaign and the DNC said, we didn't ask for any information. I don't know what you're talking about. We didn't, maybe it's the attorney, but it wasn't us. So if it's not so bad, if it's nothing and it's okay and it's done all the time, why aren't you just saying, yep, you know what? We should have labeled it properly. We failed to do, we'll correct that right now for you.
Well, as we know, the Clintons have had a long history of, they don't have any idea what you're talking about,
Exactly. Exactly.
But then, when they go with that line until there's no other options. And then all of a sudden, well, that's typical of the Clintons. But the whole thing, and I'm sure there's other tentacles that extend out from this thing. And so it's kind of like an ant bed, you know. I don't know what kind of ants you have out in Southern California, but you dig up one of those ant beds, and what you're seeing on the surface is minimal compared to what you'd find underground, and all these little tunnels and all these little channels that just extend out way far away from the top of that ant bed, or the tip of the iceberg. Most of the iceberg is beneath the surface, and so that's what's mind-blowing, troubling. To think of all the things that we don't even know about yet, and those are the things they're probably trying to conceal. It's not so much we tried to find dirt on Trump. It's what all of that is connected to.
Yeah. And again, you have some of the same players. You've got Comey, who goes back there to a while back. You've got Mueller looking at things right now. Again, he's connected way back. So how much from way back is still coming forward to even the dossier and to what we're seeing now? All of these people, I mean, you could literally, Bill, I'm telling you, you could write a book about all of this, and probably we're gonna find out that all of these people, well, if we do the research and if we have a special prosecutor, that all of these people are connected. And all of this with Russia, I'm not convinced, number one, if there was any interference with Russia, and let's face it, there's interference with Russia in every country, and other people are doing the same thing. But let's say that they tried to interfere with the election. Were they trying to interfere so that Hillary would be elected so that they could continue getting even more uranium from her and even more deals? Or were they trying not to have her elected because they got mad about what happened and having people prosecuted on the Russian side for the Uranium One deal?
Well,
is that too far-fetched?
Well, just thinking, using common sense, if Russia had been benefiting in the uranium deal through the Obama administration and then the Clinton administration, I guess it would be safe for them to assume that this would just be a continuation of what they've had up until this point, or for the last 8 years. And by the way, even though we're not talking about this, throw into that the notion that Obama is hands off when it comes to what's going on in the world and trying to restrain some of the negative forces that are at work in the world. And Russia, you would think, would definitely be interested in continuing that kind of a state of affairs. It makes more sense to me that they would benefit with a Clinton administration more so than they would with a Trump administration. Now, that being said, I want the truth to come to light. And whoever did whatever that is a threat to us and to our children, and I want those things to come to light. And whoever it shines a light on, so be it. Whoever's guilty of crime, so be it. Let that come to light. But it does, to me anyway, seems more logical. They would be more interested in a Clinton administration if all we had to go on was the uranium thing.
Yeah, exactly.
That seems to be makes more sense to me.
And who's bringing up the fact that it was against Hillary Clinton? Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
I mean, she's the one bringing up, and the people on the left are saying this was an interference. This was a Trump collusion with the Russians to interfere with the election so that Hillary Clinton wouldn't be elected president.
Well,
it's just the opposite of what we said is rational.
Well, I've said this many, many times on this show before, that those who accuse others of something are typically accusing them of what they themselves are guilty of. That is a character trait that we see in all the villains in history and biblical history. They're always accusing others of what they are guilty of. So take it for what it's worth.
Well, and if you look at everything too, it was so amazing that the left, I mean, really thought that there was no way that Hillary Clinton couldn't win. They had it so sewn up.
Yeah.
So how did they know that?
Well, I don't know, arrogance, pride, but
or planning, Bill.
Well, I'm sure there was a lot of things in place that they felt were untouchable, and so that leads us to think that maybe God did intervene. Maybe there was a miracle that occurred here, and for what purpose? That I think is yet to be seen in its fullness. But I tell you what, one day I really hope somebody writes a book about what went down in that hotel room in New York when she realized that she wasn't going to win. I bet you Bill was in the corner cowering somewhere. I bet you there was stuff flying all over the room.
I bet the temperature in the room was really hot. I mean, I can't even imagine. But Bill, back to your point just really quickly, when you said, you don't know what God's point was, let's say, to have her lose and President Trump win, and we'll maybe know that later. Maybe it was to have all of this come to light that God is revealing.
I'm choosing to believe that, Susan.
Yes.
I'm not saying God told me that. I'm just, like I told you last week, like we talked about, I just have this sense that God is beginning to expose things. A group of people, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, they may have their agenda and they may be trying to conceal this and do that. But then, God has his agenda.
Yeah.
And I know that he has promised that one day he will remove things that are not worthy of standing. Those corrupt things, he will remove them. And again, I'm repeating myself, but he doesn't do it all at one time.
Yeah.
He takes his time, but then things reach a tipping point and it happens very quickly. And I just have a sense that is what we're seeing here.
Yeah, I just, as I've said before, I don't think are there any other president, including if Hillary Clinton had made president, I don't think that this would have been revealed the way it's being revealed now and as quickly as things are being revealed. And so, that's not saying whether she's innocent or guilty, but because the left would say she's absolutely innocent of all charges that you're talking about. So, but that's just the way I feel, that I think under President Trump, it was the only person that could be in office at this time, somebody who was not a career politician, that would leave room for things like this to happen, to things to be exposed, because he didn't go by the same pattern that the old political, good old boys and everybody else, runs the government. He's totally different. And that's the part that they can't handle. And I think it makes it easier for things to come out.
Oh, I will agree with that. He does not fit the mold.
No, he doesn't. But I know what you're saying, but I'm really glad that he doesn't, because we didn't need a career politician. We needed somebody, who was coming in there to do the job and try to make America great again. And as we all know, we hear that every day. We have to do our part in doing that. And that is, and I think you'd agree, Bill, turning back to God, focusing on God. It's not through politics that we're going to make America great again or anything else.
Well, yeah, if we're going to make America great again, we have to turn back to the one who made it great in the first place.
Exactly. And Robin said, God bless you both. Great show. And I think we'll end it right there. Everybody, thank you so much for being here. Please, share this with everybody, send it in emails, get the word out about the show. Hope you enjoyed today, and we'll see you again next week. God bless.